There we go. Hey everybody, welcome back to Fluffy Talks Tabletop. Today we're going to talk about how to run games at conventions, because it is very different. When I first started running games at conventions, there were a lot of issues that I had. There's a lot of things that you can do to make yourself ready. There's a lot of work that you can put into it, and we're going to go over some of that today. Sorry about that, my pauldron got caught. So one of the first things that you can do is make a list of all the things that you're going to need. I know this sounds dumb, but I had to go to Staples twice today because I forgot something. So let's talk about the setting that that my game runs in, because that's going to change the things that that you do. Now, unfortunately, a lot of my stuff's already packed, so I can't really show off some of the stuff that I've got. But I'm running a World of Darkness game at the Scarab Gaming Convention. And these two things are important because A, now I know what dice I need, and B, I know that Scarab subscribes to Warhorn, and Warhorn allows for the pre-registering of games. Now, I have my games on Warhorn because, well, Scarab actually requires you to have your games on Warhorn, but it's not required for players to pre-register through Warhorn and go ahead and sign up for table slots. But as of this, as of earlier today when I checked, I actually have 3 players signed up already, which means that I'm going to need to mark those seats as reserved somehow when people get there. Now, this is important because I have a table maximum of 6 people, and if I have 2 seats reserved, then, you know, I can't, if I get 3 other people to come over, and then I have a couple that comes over, I can only take 1 of them. I talked a little bit about this in my how to be a good person at conventions video, which is don't complain if you didn't sign up in advance. You know, Scarab clearly posts that all their stuff is available in advance on Warhorn, and it's really important that you actually sign up for stuff if you want to be absolutely positive that you got your spot. So, you know, as the storyteller or the table manager, it's my job to ensure that people know that their table is reserved, or that those seats are reserved. So what I ended up getting were like a little reserved stand, I guess flags, I guess you call them. They have a little clip at the top, and I clip a little card that says reserved, and I put them in front of the seats. Second, I'm using pre-built characters. I'm using partially pre-built characters. So I have a big file folder full of all of my character sheets. That's what I had to go back today for. I printed off all of my documentation and all the things that I needed, but I had forgotten that I needed to replace the character sheets that got used last year because there was a very popular archetype that people chose that, that I ended up actually running out of. And while I'm thinking about it, I'm actually going to pull up my my Scarab setting stuff so that I can read out what my archetypes are. And for some unknown reason, they're not on this list. They must be on this list. They are on this list. For some reason, it didn't bring the font in. So I have a couple archetypes listed for people to kind of get a general idea of a character. And I find that this makes it so I don't have to do a lot of character creation at the start. I've got like security guard, sharpshooter, translator, construction engineer, lawyer, professional athlete, martial artist, tax attorney, network security, police officer, chemist, competition archer, college professor, and private investigator. When it comes to playing tabletop, that's a lot for a modern setting. That's a lot of the things that you might be interested in playing. And remember that these are just archetypes. You're not required for your character to actually do this. Your character does not have to, just because you pick network security archetype does not mean your character has to work in network security. He could just be some guy that knows a lot about network security because that's what he plays with in his free time. Likewise, he doesn't have to be a tax attorney. He could be a CPA. He could just be like the company's tax guy or chief financial officer of a company, something like that. Same with private investigator. Private investigator is kind of the none of these really looked interesting to me, but I still want to play the game setting. It's kind of default. So, you know, there's that. Also, if you end up actually at Scarab and you're reading the sheet, you'll notice that there are 2 redacted archetypes. This is not because I pulled 2 archetypes off the list, it's because I really wanted the list to be very even, and I am 2 away from having 16, which would make a good 4x4 square. So to make it look nice, I just put in 2 redacted slots. Go figure. So, once you have your characters kind of with their basic character idea, if you're using pre-builts, that's fine. If you're using partial pre-builts like I'm using that allow characters to finish building out their characters, and in this case, I just haven't spent the freebie points yet, make sure your characters or your players have something on the table that will allow them to fill out the rest of this. And I'm not talking about a pencil. I'm talking about not everyone has the World of Darkness freebie points sheet memorized. So I have that on the table. It lets you determine what your freebie point costs are, and I always recommend that people spend their freebie points on their Numina stuff, because that's going to be very important, and it's the only kind of magic system that your character is going to end up using. Apart from that, your characters are mortals, so... The next thing, and this is something that I've learned from playing the game several times, is have a way for your characters to identify each other. And again, this is all before you do setting and stuff like that. What I used to do was I would give everybody 2 index cards, and you would write your characters' names on both of them, and then fold them in half. Yeah, you'd actually do that first. You'd fold them in half, then you'd write your character name on one of them. Or on both of them, rather. You'd stand them up in front of yourself, and then hand the other one back to me. I use the other one to track initiative, because it's super easy. All I have to do is move the cards around, and I have my own cards for my monsters and whatever. And this way, everyone else at the table can see your character's name in front of you. That means that they don't have to constantly either ask what your character's name is or come up with it. Especially in this case where the characters may have been working together for several months and would know each other's names. So this makes life a little bit easier and shortens the amount of, well, I don't know who you are kind of thing. Also, excuse me, not everyone brought dice to the convention. Not everyone knows what dice they need. World of Darkness uses 10d10 for the most part. It's rare that you roll all of them, but you should always have 10d10, as it's kind of the maximum that you should roll, and if you're rolling more than 10d10, I'm gonna need to know why. But not everyone brings 10d10 to gaming conventions. Most of them bring a 7-die set, along with a couple extra d6 to generate characters. So what I did was I went online and I found a company that was selling like big bags of D10s, and I bought them. And it turns out that they were organized by color. So I've got, you know, colors, or I've got little cups of 10d10, one at each seat at the table, each with a different color. So it makes life a little bit easier for the players. If you don't have your own dice, that's fine. Also, if you're running World of Darkness, it's very, very rare for 2 players to have to roll at the same time for the same thing, and there's no reason why you can't just have one set of 10d10 on the table and pass it around the table. Although it does make some things run a little less smoothly. I've never really run into a scenario where having only one set of 10d10 to run the game is, you know, actually interfering, because the only roll I can think of off the top of my head that everyone rolls at the same time is initiative, and that's always 1d10. So I'm not super worried about that, but, you know, just in case of backup. Also, for people who don't have dice and want to get into World of Darkness when they go home, I let people take their dice home, which is why I bought so many. So having the physical resources to play the game, making sure that everyone has a pencil, some scrap paper, stuff like that, is very important, because having to call your game off because you didn't bring enough pencils or enough character sheets, or having to figure something out because you don't have enough dice, is always a bad thing. And it sucks to have to run to the vendors and buy another set of dice because you ran out. Or, God forbid, you drop your only d20 on the floor, and now you can't play. So that kind of sucks, which is why I bring extra dice. That's just the way that I run my table. This year, I actually have little plastic, little plastic stands for you to put your name tag in. The plastic stands will remain on the table, but you can take your character sheet and your little card home, because I don't need the cards back. Also, I throw away the DM initiative cards so that I don't accidentally get them confused with other tables. Or not with other tables, but with like my later tables and things like that, because it really sucks to call out the name of someone for initiative only to have them be from a different table or a different session that day. Next thing is working with your settings so that your characters have some reason to all work together. My lights are getting dim. Hey Google, set all the lights to 100%.
Sure, setting 7 lights brightness to 100%.
And of course it's going to change the color. Hey Google, turn all the lights white.
Okay, changing 7 lights to white.
Alright, hopefully it won't do that anymore. I don't know why it's doing that. It might be part of the new... Oh, it's because it's 10 o'clock. I'm not paying attention. Go figure. So the next thing is to work on having your characters all working together. Usually it takes a session or two for characters to start actually working together as a team, and I find that if you're going to play a pickup game, having a set of like defined reasons why your characters are all working together to start with really cuts down on the I don't trust this PC stuff. For me, it's that all characters work for the same organization. It's called the Collections Department, and their job is to go out and subdue and recover magical artifacts or broken spells or things like that. It's pretty basic, and it's essentially Warehouse 13. I chose this setting because A, it's very modular, and B, it allows for very quick pickups for people who have never played before, and also for like experienced players to come to the table, and players that have played the same game before. If they've already played in the Collections Department, they can play their same character and things like that. So it kind of makes it into a pseudo-organized play system where people can come back and continue playing. Hopefully I'll see players that I saw last year. I'm very excited, and hopefully we will. Which kind of neatly segues into another big thing, and that is try and keep your sessions very, very modular. Have a defined beginning and end point. Don't try and leave cliffhangers for the next session, because not everyone is going to be able to attend the next session, and if you have an entire new group that comes to the next session and they don't have any information from the previous session, well, they might be out of luck. What if you drop a key that opens the next door or something like that, and then all those players drop for their next session, and you end up with the person who had the key leaving the table? Well, that's super not good, and now the players at the table cannot progress because they don't have this item, and you're going to have to either write a way around that or come up with something else. I find that trying to keep my sessions very, very modular and very swappable makes it very, very easy. I also have a formula for writing new sessions and things like that. What I do is I come up with an artifact or magic item or unique thing to be retrieved. Then I build a scenario around that. I design a couple red herrings to be thrown in there so that people don't immediately know what they're looking for. A statue that comes to life and murders people is a pretty unique concept, but if they already know what they're looking for going in, that's no fun. Send them in there to investigate weird animal attacks, though, and they might be looking in the wrong place, which could, I don't want to say waste time, but it pads out your session time and can help you fill up your time slot. Although, if you tend to run over, maybe don't do that. So having the ability to swap modules in and out like that is really, really important to me, because my ability to quickly pick up a sheet of paper and say, okay, we're going to run this module. It doesn't matter if it's a module I'm super familiar with or if it's a module that I created 10 years ago that I'm just now getting around to playing, or one that I run every single time. It's going to be a lot of fun to play, and hopefully I can make it work. Also, be wary of PCs that come in to break your game and things like that. And again, I talked about this in my Don't Be a Dick at Conventions thing, but you don't want players to come in and be immediately able to break a session. So if you have to come up with a banned list of banned powers and abilities because this particular session requires certain things or has to go a certain way or things like that, don't be afraid to do that. My first session that I run for my Wyverley College campaign, which is not a convention campaign, is broken if somebody plays the race known as the Dreamwalker, because it starts out with a dream sequence and no one is aware of that. But a Dreamwalker would immediately know that they are in a dream and be able to affect that dream in ways that they shouldn't be allowed to. And the problem with this is I can't really tell my players, no, you can't do that, especially if they want to play a Dreamwalker. So I have a backup session in the event that someone plays a Dreamwalker. So looking out for little tiny things like that is always really, really important. There's a power in my game that lets you see through security cameras and hear through microphones. It's called Cyber Senses. It's really, really useful, but you have to be really careful that you don't just put your secret magic artifact behind a locked vault with a security camera in it. Especially if it's like a captured creature or something like that, because a player with Cyber Senses is going to find it immediately. So be sure to watch what your players get when they start or what they build their character with, because you could end up with some really weird stuff, and they may end up breaking the game from the top. I tried not to build any Numina that were game-breaking, but sometimes it happens. Sometimes you accidentally build something in there. Sometimes weird stuff happens. Sometimes a weird conversation that your character has ends up with an ally that completely breaks the game, or I don't know, maybe an NPC owes them a favor and due to things that happened, and they call it in for something and it completely breaks the game. So you can't avoid everything, but try and avoid the bad stuff that you can immediately write out. Also, I only have 3 players signed up for all of my games that I am running pretty much the entirety of Friday, Sunday, and Monday. I'm kind of relying on walk-ups, and it's going to be really important to me that people walk up to my table and decide that they want to play. And the way that I'm doing that is to look very organized. I have a little sign that sits on my table that says the collections department for a World of Darkness style modern day horror game for 3 to 6 players, and they immediately know what that is. Even if I'm not at the table, I don't have to answer any questions or anything like that. They see that and they know. If they decide that they want to play World of Darkness, or they want to play a horror game or something like that, which mine isn't too horror-y, but it can get like that, so I have to be careful with that. Then there you go. You have a neat little blurb that tells people what you're on about from the start. I have characters get an intro sheet and a character building guide, which is just 2 pages, immediately at the start. And that's sitting in, this year, it's going to be sitting in a red manila folder, which I shouldn't say that because manila is the color, but it's sitting in a red file folder. And so I have one of those with a pencil on it and a dice cup at every single table. It looks nice, neat, clean, and organized. And hopefully that will draw people to my table. I don't want it to look, disorganized or anything like that. I want people to see that and go, oh, he looks like he knows what he's doing. This might be a lot of fun. Now, another thing about running convention games, especially if you're running super modular, like single one-shots the whole weekend, do not be afraid to crank the difficulty up a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean more than a little bit. There's nothing wrong with having a table or a session lose. It happens. Maybe they don't retrieve the item in time. Maybe something terrible happens. Maybe more people get killed and they weren't able to prevent it. Well, that's on them. Don't specifically put things that the players have no control over, because that sucks and it makes them feel powerless. It makes them feel like they don't have any effect on anything. But by cranking the difficulty up a little bit and having it possible to lose, these random people that have come up to your table that you might not have ever met before are going to play as hard as they can, knowing that they might lose, especially if you can find a way to convey this information very early on. Like they go out to the city to go look for the item, and the first night it kills 2 people. Well, if they had had their setup a little better, if they were out looking in the right places, I don't want to say the right places, but if they had done their canvassing correctly or done a little bit more research beforehand, that might have been prevented. It's not an immediate, there's nothing you can do, but this lets you know, or lets them know immediately that you're not messing around. By having that difficulty up a little tiny bit higher, and by a little bit I mean quite a bit, you can really create a challenging and fun session that isn't just go to the place and do the thing when you get there. It actually makes the game a lot of fun, and I find that a lot of times dungeon masters will build games to play, and the assumption is that they will win, or the PCs will win every time. By having a setup where the PCs can lose but not all die is a really fun and unique aspect of it, because you get the profound feeling of loss, but this might even motivate the players to come back to the table and try another session, knowing that this time they might be able to do it differently. Which, speaking of which, if you can avoid it, try not to run the same session over and over and over. If you're just running the same game all week, A, you're going to get bored with it. B, people are going to figure it out. They're going to talk amongst themselves. If they say, hey, I'm going over to play the collections department. Oh, if you do that, don't pick up the black sphere off the hotel countertop. It actually influences your character, and it will change your ability to do anything in the final boss room, if there's a final boss room, or it makes you super duper weak to the final boss's mind control or something like that. Well, that's not information that player should have. And again, we talked about this in the Don't Be a Dick at Conventions thing, but if you can run different sessions every time, people won't come back to play the same game over and over until they win, or they game it to where they get exactly what they want, or they break it, or whatever. By having a modular system that allows you to run different sessions all weekend, especially on a 4-day con, you can have a lot of different encounters and a lot of different scenarios that play out the whole weekend, and you can get people who want to continue playing to see what else you have. You don't get people who come out for one session and win, or sit there frustrated over and over trying to get the same session every time to work. Or, admittedly, just gaming the session every time because they know what they're doing. I'd hate to have to tell somebody, hey, you played this session 3 times already, you already know how it works, I can't let you play again. Well, that's on me. I should have other content. You know, it's not a board game. The object isn't to win every time. The object is to have fun, and to create, or if you're the player, play in an immersive world and immerse yourself in it. That's the whole point of why we play tabletop games. And to kind of convey that, you have to have scenarios where people are going to lose. You have to have scenarios where maybe it's super easy one time. Maybe you go out there and you get out there and the artifact that you're looking for is laying on the ground, and you pick it up and walk away. Now, first thought might be, well, that's not any fun at all. Well, if they do that, maybe this session isn't about that. Maybe this session is about something weird that's going on at headquarters. So this was just a really quick little, let's get you guys out in the field so that you know what's going on, and then you get back and you have to deal with things at headquarters because, oh no, the Merovingian axe has escaped from the container that it's in, and now you have this crazy axe that's trying to kill people flying around through headquarters, knocking shit off tables and stuff like that. Sorry about that. And you have to go back and deal with that. That is an interesting session, and if you're going to do that, probably best not to just send them out into an easy pickup. But, you know, not all sessions have to be super duper difficult, but keeping that difficulty level to the point where the players feel challenged and feel rewarded for completing it is an important thing. You know, I like to challenge my players. I like to make my players feel good about completing the session, not just because they were there and they did all the things, but because they came up with good solutions to the problems that they were given, and that there was definitely a way for them to lose. By allowing players to know that there was definitely a way for them to screw up, then that makes them feel good about what they did, especially if they came up with a particularly clever solution. Now, this little tip is kind of specific to the way that I run my games, but for World of Darkness, if you're going to run a World of Darkness game or a point-buy game or something like that, and not just Dungeons & Dragons all weekend, and even maybe for Dungeons & Dragons, you want to start, if people start coming back to the tables, start limiting the amount of XP that they get. You know, it sucks to end up with a super high-level PC just because they've played the whole day, because they didn't sign up for anything else. Well, now other players are being penalized because they didn't play enough, and that's not fair. World of Darkness is a little bit better about this because there's not a huge gulf between high-level characters and low-level characters because everyone's good at something. And it's possible to build a character off the bat that rolls 8 die for things. It's actually possible to build a character off the bat that rolls 9 die for things if you're super duper careful about how you do it. But, you know, World of Darkness is all about engineering situations into making you situationally useful. I feel like my lights are dimming again. Hey Google, set the lights to 100%.
Okay.
They totally are. I'm not going crazy. I don't know why it's doing that. I'm gonna have to fix my lights. Anyways, hopefully I was still showing up on camera. But again, when you're working in a convention setting, you're very limited on the amount of time that you have to work with your players. I give maybe 30 minutes to flesh out and finish building your character, and that's it. That's all you've got. If you haven't spent all your freebie points by 30 minutes, if you're almost done, we'll make allowances. If you're nowhere near done, if you haven't spent anything, you're out of luck. You know, I can't sit around and wait for you to build your character all day. So you've got 30 minutes to build your character, which, you know, they're mostly pre-built. All you have to do is spend your freebie points. Shouldn't take that long. But, you know, build your character. We got to get in and get into conveying what's going on. So that to me is very, very important. I have, at maximum, I think I have 5 hours. I think my blocks are 5 hours long. I really should know this since I'm going tomorrow. 5 hours to get 6 people, up to 6 people, get their characters built, teach them how to play if they don't know how to play, which World of Darkness is pretty easy when it comes to the basics of the game. Teach them how to play, get them understanding that the people that they are playing with, they've already worked with for a while, and get into conveying a full story all in under 5 hours. And I usually manage to get through this with about, sometimes up to an hour to spare. I usually try and run about a 4 to 4.5 hour block, but I've sat at tables where this wasn't executed as well. My Shadows of Esteren game that I sat in, pre-built characters, dropped immediately. They were quickly explained, the mechanics were explained very easily, and it was, the storyteller said, we will explain other mechanics when you get to them. Here's what you can do, we will get into how you can do it later. And that worked really well. Whenever we got to a thing where it was like, okay, I want to do this, how do I do this? No problem, that was explained. So, getting to the point at which you are conveying your story is super duper important. And I know I'm kind of rambling here, and I kind of go over the same points over and over, so I'm sorry about that, but I really want to get it across that running a game at a convention is very different from running a continuous weekly or bi-weekly session with your friends. You know, you don't have an entire session to get 6 people to play together. You only have maybe 30 to 45 minutes to get them in the mindset of, we need to play together. You know, you have to get things moving quickly, and you have to be succinct and concise in what you do, or you're going to wind up talking yourself over your own time limit, which is kind of what I'm doing right now. Sorry. Just botched a drink water check. That's fantastic. Wasn't aware that we were playing Rollmaster today. Anyways. So yeah, be organized, try and be modular, be flexible. When it comes to these sessions, everyone's going to run stuff differently. Everyone's going to have different play styles. You're going to have up to 6 different play styles at the table at one time. Be ready for that. People are going to... You're going to get the people who are paranoid about traps all the time. They're going to check everything for traps. Doesn't matter what game it is, people are always paranoid about traps. Don't know why. And it's always funny when they spend the whole time checking for traps, and everyone's like, there are no traps, don't worry about it, and then there's a trap. I like that. If I'm going to throw traps in, I usually don't throw them in until late, because I like making my players think they're safe. But being quick and being organized is of the utmost importance on building a game like this where you can just pick up and run, because that's what this is. This is a pickup game. This is my 3rd year running the same exact session. Kind of. The first year I ran this game as a modified version of Pathfinder, and I let everyone build their own characters at the table. That did not work very well. It was actually the worst decision that I had made when it comes to building the game. It took them over an hour sometimes to build their characters, and yes, they got exactly what they wanted, but it took up a ton of time. Also, this was when I was playing on short sessions, so I only had, I think, 2 or 3 hour blocks. So I only had like 1 or 2 hours to actually run my session. So I switched to longer blocks. I switched to World of Darkness so that I could run shorter sessions, or I could run full sessions, because it's a simpler game. I would have to spend less time explaining games and stuff like that. Clara was able to successfully run D20 Modern, and she did not let players build their own characters at the table. She used pre-built characters, which was smart because it takes forever to build a World of Darkness, a D20 Modern character. And all those little shortcuts made things a lot easier. Also, most people that come to gaming conventions, I hate to say it this way, but most people that come to gaming conventions know how to play D20. They've played Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder or D20 Modern or D20 Past or something like that, and they know how the D20 system works. Not everybody knows how the World of Darkness system works, even though they should, because it's a great game. So you end up with having to teach 6 players how to play a game that they've never touched dice for, never seen a character sheet for. They don't know how to read the character sheet, which kind of sucks because when they're doing character building, they don't know what they're doing. It can be a hassle, and the biggest thing here is be confident and don't worry. That's 2 things. You will get everything worked out, and sometimes it takes a couple years to debug things. My second year, I ran World of Darkness instead of D20, and it ran super duper smoothly. My larger time blocks and switching to a simpler game made it so that I could actually run the game that I wanted to play instead of a version of the game that I wanted to play on a different setting, or on a different system. Switching off of Pathfinder made running my session easy mode. And then I could spend more time throughout my day writing new modules and things like that. And I actually decided that year that on Monday I would spend my time blocks running a story session. So every year there is one story session, and players that played the year before or that played throughout the entire weekend or anything like that can come back for that story session, and they get a little bit of advancement. I try not to make it like a big thing, but this way players that have been with me the whole weekend actually get a little bit of story instead of just their single module, and it makes it so that they want to come back next year and see what happens that story session. Also, I try and recap all of the story sessions that happen every year to all the players that are playing in the story sessions, which brings me to one big thing. If you are running the same story session multiple times so that everyone gets to play, you need to figure out which one is canon. Normally what I do is we take like the average of all the things that happened. For example, if one team let an NPC die, but most teams didn't, that NPC will be alive next time. And we can come up with an explanation as to why they didn't die. Like, maybe they weren't dead. Maybe they were incapacitated and you didn't check. Maybe they woke up out in the woods somewhere. Maybe somebody else came along and helped that NPC after you left. Now, this is kind of hard for NPCs that were completely and totally obliterated and things like that. But for an NPC that was, I don't know, thrown into the void, well, that's that's pretty serious. But it's also pretty possible to just come back from the void and not have any memories of it. So, you know, there you go. Maybe that NPC, when you play your timeline, if you mention, hey, this NPC got thrown into the void last time, I didn't think they were still alive. Well, they fell back out of the void a couple days later when you guys were wrapping up all this void portal nonsense, and they have no memory of it. So, you know, maybe that will be included in the story session. So, you know, try and keep your canon straight and stuff like that. It's relatively simple to get your head around once you get some practice with it. Averaging story sessions is something that takes time and takes practice. Also, you always end up with like the one group that totally and utterly fails the session. So next year when they come back to play, hopefully they end up in all the same group, and you can just be like, okay, so you guys were the group that failed last time, here's what happens for you guys. But if you can't, just tell them, hey, every year we average out the story session. You guys failed, but the main groups, or the main storyline did not change. So here's to recap what happened, and then we're going to move on from there. It sucks kind of having to say, this is how it goes, but if you're going to try and run any kind of story at conventions, you have to deal with the fact that everyone's going to be running the same story, and it's always going to come out different. Last but not least is trying to make sure that everything runs as smoothly as possible. And this is kind of a culmination of all the things that I've talked about throughout this video. You know, making sure that you're organized, things like that. Have backups for everything. If you have one sheet with all of your modules on it, please, please, please tell me you saved it on Google Docs or something like that. It is important to have backups of important paperwork. Take notes, you know, scribble them down, try and keep them organized so that next session you know what did or did not work. For example, there's a statue that comes to life and does anything that you want, but it has to kill somebody, and then it turns back. Well, that's great. That's a really cool idea. I use that idea. The problem with that is, well, if the statue just turns back after it kills someone, you're going to find a statue next to a dead body. PCs are going to recover that pretty easily when they go out and they find it, or they find that the police have apprehended the statue. So I had to adjust that setting so that the statue not teleports, but appears back in its owner's like house somewhere, or wherever they live. Because the first session, the PCs found it pretty quickly, and I had to come up with something real fast. And, you know, it didn't work as well as I wanted it to. So don't be afraid to get things wrong. Don't be afraid to have to retcon things or change things later. It's a game, you know? People come out to have fun. If they have fun, that's what matters. If they don't have fun, ask them why. Good feedback. You know, talk to your players at the end. Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? What would you like to see differently next year? I will be back next year. What can I do to make you want to come back to my table? You know, ask your players what they liked, what they disliked. Is there anything that you can do differently? And every year I always have a couple people say, I wish you'd run this as Pathfinder. Well, I ran it as Pathfinder, and it didn't work as well. I switched to World of Darkness because I like the setting better, and it fits this type of scenario better. So, you know, take into account what people say about your game, but remember that you have the final say in things. If everyone wants you to run Pathfinder for this, but you already ran it, you know it doesn't work, don't do it. You know, maybe they'll come around. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll go sign up for other things, and you'll get different people at your table. Eventually you'll get people at your table that like the game. It's, you know, it's all about finding what you want to play and what other players want to experience. Whew. Thank you guys for watching another episode of Fluffy Talks Tabletop. You can find me at Scarab Gaming Convention this weekend. That would be the 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th of January. If you miss me this year, I'll be back next year on Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. I think it's Junior. Where I will be running the same game, the Collections Department, which is a World of Darkness game that uses modified house rule setting and a modified house rule system and a custom setting to be modular for games. As a heads up, we are probably going to switch to a Tuesday schedule instead of a Wednesday schedule, as my Tuesday night World of Darkness game has now moved to Wednesdays. And my Tuesday night World of Darkness game is in Columbia. Well, now Wednesday. It's in Columbia, which is an hour drive for me, so it takes me a little bit to get back, and I usually don't get back until 1 o'clock in the morning. So, probably won't be running this on Wednesdays anymore. Gonna try and do it Tuesdays. Thanks for watching another episode. If you have any content that you want to see, let me know. Let me know in the comments what you guys are interested in seeing, if you want me to run specific things. Again, we do have a game setting that was given to us by a game company. I'm still reading through the session, and I want to actually run a session of reading through the system, and I want to run one session of it as a pickup or play in it to try and learn a lot more about how it plays. Once I'm confident in the system, I will do a video on it. So if you happen to be that company watching this video and you're wondering why you didn't immediately get a video on that, it's because I don't want to just read the handbook to the camera. I actually want to know what I'm talking about. So, see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Let us know what you want to see, and we will catch you guys later.